Have you ever felt it? That strange pull in your chest when life looks normal on the outside, yet something inside still feels unfinished. You smile, you talk, you move through people, through days, through routines, but a quiet part of you keeps waiting for something deeper, something calmer, something real. And what if I told you that somewhere in your world there is already a person who does not see you as temporary, someone who has gone beyond simple attraction, someone who has started imagining a future with you before even finding the courage to admit it to themselves? Stay with me, because this is not about fantasy. This is about the silent way deep feelings grow. It does not begin with loud words. It does not begin with dramatic confessions. It begins in the small moments people almost ignore. A look that lasts a second too long, a calm that feels unusual, a comfort that cannot be explained. And when that comfort becomes attached to one person, everything starts to change. Listen closely, because what comes next may explain more than you expect about the connection already forming around you and about the person whose heart is moving closer to you in silence. Maybe you have known emptiness in love before. Maybe you gave your time, your care, even your hope, and still walked away feeling unseen. Maybe disappointment taught you to expect less. Maybe you became careful, quieter, harder to impress, slower to trust. That happens. The heart learns from every letdown. But even when people protect themselves, they do not stop longing for something steady. They still want a bond where they can breathe, a bond that does not feel like performance, a bond where they do not have to chase, guess, or shrink themselves just to be kept around. And this is where your presence has become powerful in someone's inner world. Not because you tried to impress them, not because you forced anything, but because you carry something rare, a certain quiet strength, a softness that does not beg for attention, a kindness that does not make noise. They notice the way you keep going when life is heavy. They notice the way you stay gentle without becoming weak. They notice the way you care without turning it into a show. These details matter more than most people realize. Real attachment does not always grow from excitement first. Often it grows from relief, from the feeling that around one person the body can unclench, the mind can rest, and the heart does not need armor all the time. That is how you enter their emotional space. Slowly, naturally, without a big turning point in the beginning at first. Maybe they only thought you were interesting. Maybe they enjoyed talking to you. Maybe they just felt a little lighter around you and did not think too much about it. But the mind keeps records of peace. The nervous system remembers safety. So without knowing it, they started linking your presence to something calm. Then little by little, that calm became important. Your absence became noticeable. Your messages carried weight. Your tone mattered. The smallest shift in your energy stayed with them long after the moment passed. This is how attachment deepens in real life. Not always in fire, sometimes in warmth, not always in chaos, sometimes in quiet certainty. And what makes it stronger is that you may not even realize how much emotional space you already occupy in their mind. They replay ordinary moments involving you. Conversations that seemed simple at the time now feel larger in memory. A joke, a pause, a look, a shared silence. The human mind does this when someone becomes emotionally meaningful. It takes neutral moments and fills them with value. It returns to them, studies them, holds them close. So if their behavior has felt slightly different, more careful, more reflective, more present, and then oddly distant, there is a reason. They are no longer dealing with casual interest. They are dealing with feelings that have begun to matter. This person may already be close to you. It could be someone who has been in your life longer than you think. Someone who stayed quiet because they were afraid to damage what already exists. They may have told themselves it was safer to remain where they are than risk changing the dynamic and losing you completely. Or it could be someone newer, someone whose connection with you felt strangely natural from the very beginning, as if something in them recognized peace before their mind could explain it. Either way, one truth is growing inside them. You do not feel temporary anymore. And once that shift happens, the imagination changes too. They stop thinking only about moments with you and start imagining continuity, not fantasy in a shallow way, something more grounded, a real rhythm. Talking at the end of a hard day, sharing daily routines, being present in each other's stress, joy, silence, and healing. They begin picturing what stability with you might feel like. This matters. Attraction can spark quickly, but emotional significance builds a future in the mind. It makes someone think beyond the moment. It makes them ask bigger questions. What would life feel like beside this person? What would it be like to stop searching? What if peace is not boring? What if peace is exactly what love was supposed to feel like all along? At night, when distractions fade, your presence becomes even louder in them. This is where truth gets harder to avoid. In the stillness, they replay the way you looked at them. They think about things you said that seemed small but carried warmth. They wonder if you notice the tension beneath their silence. They wonder whether you can feel the unspoken meaning sitting just under the surface whenever the two of you are near each other. And yet, even with all this, hesitation remains. Deep feelings make people vulnerable. The more someone cares, the more they become aware of what they could lose. That awareness creates caution. It can make a person seem slower, more guarded, even confusing. One day they move closer. The next day they hold back, not because the feeling is fading, but because it is growing too fast for them to manage comfortably. This is important, so do not miss it. Distance does not always mean disinterest. Sometimes distance is the nervous system trying to control what the heart can no longer hide. They want clarity, but they also fear it. They want to speak, but they know speaking changes everything. Once feelings are named, safety disappears, the unknown becomes real, the risk becomes visible. And still silence is beginning to cost them more than honesty. That is why the pressure inside them keeps building. There is another reason this connection feels heavier than usual. You represent peace in a world where they may have known confusion. Maybe they have dealt with unstable love before, mixed signals, emotional games, fast highs followed by deep doubt. Many people become used to intensity and mistake it for meaning. But then they meet someone who feels different. Someone who does not create chaos, just to prove there is passion. Someone who does not make them work for every ounce of closeness. Someone whose presence lowers their guard instead of raising their anxiety. That is what you have become for them. A safe place they did not expect to find. And when the body starts linking one person with safety, attachment roots itself deeply. It becomes more than desire. It becomes regulation, calm, restoration, a sense of coming home emotionally. Maybe you know this kind of tiredness too. Maybe you reached a point where disappointment felt more familiar than stability. Maybe part of you stopped expecting anything long-lasting because temporary connections kept teaching the same painful lesson. But this bond carries a different energy. It is not built on noise. It is built on steadiness. And sometimes the deepest love begins exactly there, in the place where the heart finally stops bracing for impact. Keep listening, because this is where everything starts becoming impossible for them to ignore. Even silence between you has changed. It is no longer empty. It carries charge. Eye contact says more than language. A simple pause can feel full. A normal moment can suddenly feel unforgettable. Most emotional shifts happen long before people speak about them directly. They happen in attention, in timing, in the way one person starts noticing everything about the other. The more this person tried to control what they felt, the more obvious it became inside them. That is the strange truth about strong feelings. What is resisted often grows louder. Instead of fading, you became more present in their thoughts. Instead of becoming manageable, the connection gained weight. Your attention lifts their mood. Your silence makes them reflect. A delayed reply can stay in their mind longer than it should. A warm exchange can carry them through the day. This is not a small effect. This is emotional influence. And once one person begins affecting another at that level, the bond is no longer casual. It matters. It shapes their inner world. That is why they sometimes appear conflicted. Close one day, careful the next. Their mind is trying to protect them, while their heart is already choosing you. They are balancing longing against fear, hope against caution, desire against the possibility of loss. But emotional truth has a way of building pressure. If it stays inside too long, it starts demanding expression. That turning point is getting closer. Real connection changes people from the inside before anyone else fully sees it. It reshapes what they value. It changes what they imagine for their future. It softens certain defenses and exposes certain fears, and in their case, one fear stands above the rest. Now, not simply the fear of rejection, though that still exists. It is something deeper, the fear that you may not feel the same, and that by speaking, they may lose not only hope, but access to your presence as it is now. This is why they pause before sending certain messages, why they rethink simple words, why they study your reactions more closely than before. When feelings become serious, people start looking for signs of safety. They search for consistency, reciprocity, open doors, and recently something small may have changed everything for them. A glance from you, a softness in your voice, a moment where you understood them without needing extra explanation. Maybe it seemed ordinary from the outside, but inside them, it sparked something powerful. Hope, And hope is dangerous in the best way, because once hope enters, fear loses its absolute control. A person can endure uncertainty for a while, but when hope appears, they begin imagining what could happen if they were brave. They begin asking the question that changes everything. What if this is real? What if this is not one-sided? What if what I feel is already being felt on the other side too? That question does not leave easily once it takes root. It follows them into quiet hours, into ordinary tasks, into songs, streets, late nights, and small pauses in the day. The mind starts collecting evidence. The way your conversations flow naturally, the way silence with you does not feel awkward, the way emotional depth appears without force. These are not small things. For someone who has guarded their heart, they are signs, and signs become fuel. The walls they spent years building begin weakening without them even noticing. Now they catch themselves imagining moments they never planned to imagine. Walking beside you with no emotional distance, sharing pieces of life that people usually protect, building something slow and true instead of intense and unstable. That shift is huge. It means you are no longer someone they simply notice. You are someone they have begun placing inside their inner future. Listen carefully here, because this part matters. Once a person starts including you in their future thinking, the emotional bond has already crossed a line. It is no longer about curiosity. It is about possibility. And possibility is what makes every interaction feel sharper. Now they are no longer only aware of their feelings. They are wondering about yours, reading your tone, replaying your words, asking themselves whether the chemistry they feel is visible in your eyes too. That uncertainty does not weaken the bond. It often deepens it because the heart keeps moving toward what feels both meaningful and almost reachable. The truth is, emotional chemistry is rarely experienced as a flat, silent thing. It shows itself in subtle mirroring. Attention grows, eye contact lingers, presence becomes brighter, even when nothing dramatic happens. Both people begin feeling that the energy is different. They have noticed these shifts with you and it has affected them more deeply than they expected. Now a song can pull them back to you. A quiet room can suddenly fill with your memory. An ordinary pause in the day can feel emotionally tied to your presence for no clear reason. This happens when someone becomes emotionally important. The brain begins prioritizing them automatically. Their face, their words, their mood, their absence, all of it rises to the front of thought. That is why they cannot simply distract themselves away from you anymore. And if their behavior lately seems more intentional, more measured, more emotionally careful, it is because they are feeling more than they know how to reveal. There have already been moments when they almost said everything. Moments when the truth came right up to the edge of expression, but then fear stepped in again. Not because the feeling is uncertain, but because it is too certain to risk lightly. Do not skip over that. The clearest feelings are often the hardest to confess. When someone realizes how deeply another person affects their emotional state, every possible outcome begins to feel bigger, heavier, more serious. That is where they are living now. One thought changed something important inside them. They imagined losing you completely. Not just missing a chance, truly losing access to your presence, watching life move on while everything meaningful stayed unspoken. That thought hit harder than expected because in that moment they saw the truth clearly. This connection is no longer optional in their emotional world. Loss felt real, and real loss reveals real attachment. Many people do not understand their own feelings until they picture life without the person who has quietly become essential to them. That image created a sharp kind of clarity. Now the question is no longer do I care? They already know the answer. The question is what happens if I stay silent too long? That is what has started pushing them toward honesty. You changed something in them. You made emotional stability feel attractive again. You made softness feel safe instead of risky. You made them think about love without chaos, closeness without games, consistency without fear. These are not small internal changes. Once a person starts valuing peace over confusion because of one specific connection, that connection begins shaping their whole emotional direction. Even people around them may be noticing the difference. A more thoughtful mood, a quieter seriousness, a softer tone. Real attachment leaves signs. It changes the energy of a person before it changes the words they speak. And deep down they are starting to know that what they feel is not passing, it is growing roots. What makes this even stronger is that they no longer see this as simple attraction. Attraction can be powerful, but it can also be temporary. What they feel now goes beyond being drawn to you. It feels like compatibility, peace, emotional fit, something that could hold under real-life pressure. That is why their thoughts have shifted from what this feels like to what this could become. For the first time, the future with you does not seem unrealistic to them. It seems possible, serious, worth protecting, worth risking something for. But before truth comes out, one last fear still stays alive inside them. The fear of surrendering control, because once they speak, they cannot manage the outcome anymore. They can only reveal their heart and wait. That is terrifying for anyone who has learned to survive by staying guarded. Still another fear is now becoming stronger than that one. The fear of missing something real because silence felt safer in the moment. And that fear does not let them rest, especially at night, especially when the mind has no noise to hide behind. They imagine a future where you slowly drift away, never fully knowing what lived inside them. They imagine you building a life at emotional distance while they stay behind with everything they never said. That thought creates regret before the loss has even happened. And regret is powerful. It forces emotional truth into the light. It strips away excuses. It asks a brutal question. If this matters so much, why keep hiding it? You may already be sensing this shift, even if nothing has been said out loud. Maybe their attention feels more focused when you speak. Maybe they seem more emotionally present, as if they are listening for more than just words. Maybe their pauses around you feel heavier now, as though meaning is gathering beneath. That is not your imagination. That is pressure building, emotional truth, trying to find form. They can no longer treat your impact as something small. You have changed how they think about love itself. They are starting to choose depth over drama, honesty over image, steadiness over thrill. That kind of change is rare, and once it begins, it is difficult to reverse. Someone close to them may have even noticed. A friend, a family member, someone who picked up on the change in their tone or behavior. Maybe they were asked, "What is different lately?" And maybe they could not fully hide it. Maybe they did not say your name, but the meaning was there. There is someone in my life who makes me feel differently, someone who makes love look less exhausting, someone who makes openness feel possible again. This is what real emotional bonds do. They do not just create desire, they reorganize priorities. They make a person want to become more honest, more available, more emotionally awake. And once someone starts moving in that direction because of you, the silence between feeling and confession begins getting shorter with every passing day. Still, there are moments when fear returns at the last second. That is the paradox of deep attachment. The more someone matters, the more carefully we protect the possibility of losing them. So there are times when they almost speak and then stop, times when vulnerability rises and then retreats, not because they doubt the feeling, but because they know it is too important to risk carelessly. Yet something is breaking that old pattern now. Slowly, quietly, but clearly, they are starting to understand that emotional control is not the same as emotional safety. In fact, keeping everything hidden no longer feels safe. It feels like avoidance. It feels like standing still while something real waits on the other side. This change inside them has opened new images in their mind. Not fantasy for the sake of fantasy, but simple human scenes. A life with less guessing. A closeness built on trust. A bond where care is not hidden. A future where they do not have to keep wondering what would have happened if they had just been brave. And without trying, you have become part of that future thinking. That changes everything because now their emotions are not moving in one direction only. It is no longer just about what they feel. It is about what they believe might already exist between you. And once a person starts believing that a real mutual connection may be possible, silence becomes harder to defend, harder to justify, harder to keep alive. Even the smallest interactions feel changed to them now. A glance seems longer, a smile seems warmer. A simple exchange seems to hold extra meaning. Not because the outside world suddenly transformed, but because their inner world already